Welcome to Em.Powercoaching. Em.Powercoaching combines mental and physical fitness to help you connect the dots to unveil a more confident, energized and empowered version of you. So if you're ready, let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome to Empowering You with Emma. Thank you once again for joining me this week to tune into my podcast. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. I've really been enjoying just listening and hearing the feedback over the past couple of weeks from my listeners, from you guys. It's been really valuable and really useful to have that insight as well. So thank you for your feedback there. So this week we are going to be talking about 4 main causes of emotional eating. Emotional eating could also be known as binge eating. And I mean, there's a scale on this as to how severe it is, how much of a problem it could be for you if you are currently going through this, whether it's disordered eating or whether it is actually an eating disorder. But we're just going to look at like the 4 main reasons that are connected to emotional eating and how you could potentially really just pause and think if you can resonate with any of these, and then I can provide you with some ideas of how to overcome this if you're currently going through it, or looking at ways that you can try and better manage it. So a little bit of a background, if you don't know already, I suffered with bulimia myself about 11 years now. I suffered with it for 6 years in total. It took a while for me to get diagnosed. I didn't realise I had a problem. I thought I was in control. And that's probably one of the main reasons why it actually took me so long to get over in the first place. Forward 11 years on, just to keep it short and sweet, I am now fully recovered and working as a women's holistic eating disorder recovery coach, specialising in bulimia and binge eating. So I understand the cycle really, really well, because obviously I've been there, and I speak to many ladies on a daily basis who are still going through this struggle. You could be dealing with something like this anywhere between a year to all the way up to 30 years, if not more. It's very different for everyone, and obviously there's many factors that can play into either disordered eating or having an eating disorder. It's not usually just down to nutrition itself. So everyone's different, everyone's journey is different, and that's why my approach to the recovery is so different as well. But one of the main things that is important for everyone is to try and identify what your struggles are and what's actually led you to doing this, to living your life in this way. Because if you're not able to understand and identify why you're doing this and the triggers that can cause the events, if you're never going to understand that, then it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome it. So it's always really good to understand that first and foremost, which is why I want to do this podcast today, because I just feel like it's really valuable in the first steps to being able to start your recovery journey or overcome and gain a better relationship with food in general. So like I say, emotional eating, it's on a huge scale. It can be that maybe you just have the odd moment in life where you're feeling the pressure a lot more, there's a lot going on, life events, and you might find that for a short period of time, or even as a one-off, every now and then you tend to find yourself emotional eating or binge eating, which basically means eating a lot of food in one go. Or it could be that you're further up the scale with disordered eating. Somewhere along the line, your relationship with food has become quite negative, and a coping mechanism for life stresses or pressures potentially could be the cause behind your disordered eating. You've found a way to cope with your stress, and that has potentially come from your eating habits. And then again, further up on the other end of the scale with an eating disorder, this is where you really just have no control over what you're doing, or at least that's how you feel, like you have no control, and it just imprisons you, and you have this on a daily basis. This struggle is constant. It's a cycle. You feel trapped. There's no way of getting out of it. It becomes an addiction. It's a habit. And it's very, very hard to just stop and say, right, I'm not going to do it anymore. That's when it becomes a larger problem and when you may have to seek help and support. So we are starting very much at the very beginning of anyone's identification. So trying to just first and foremost understand the potential reasons behind your emotional eating or binge eating. Now, just because I'm covering these 4 main causes, and the reason why I'm calling them the main causes is because these are the reasons that tend to crop up the most when I speak to my ladies on a daily basis. These are what we kind of identify as being their triggers, but that doesn't mean that these are necessarily going to resonate with you. It might be that you have a completely different reason. This is just to give you an idea to potentially think about. Could it be any of these? If so, then, great, we've been able to identify it. That's your first step in recovery. If not, then also great, because you can kind of cross those off the potentials and, dive a little bit further into what else the cause could be for your emotional eating. Okay, so let's get into the first one then. So I tend to find this happens on a regular basis when I'm speaking to my ladies, that they have a low threshold for discomfort. So having a greater ability to be able to sit with your discomfort will reduce your need to eat emotionally by a mile. But some people are just more capable of dealing with pain and are more capable of handling emotional discomfort. And then some people really struggle with it. And if you're someone who really struggles with feelings of discomfort from whatever reason in life, it might be that at one point you have found that your emotions are improved by eating certain foods. Now, chances are this is short term, but if you've done it once, you've already created that connection in your mind that anytime you feel discomfort, pain, or just an emotional scenario that you're unable to handle, if you've gone to food once, chances are you're going to go back to it because you've created that connection in your head, and that's going to store in your memory. Most of us will avoid uncomfortable situations as much as we can. It's just not nice to go through anything like that. Now that could be anything. It could be dealing with anxiety. It could be certain stresses. It could be going through a breakup, a bad relationship with your friends, anything. And the easy way out is just to avoid it. But you can't get skilled at dealing with an uncomfortable situation if you continue to avoid it. So by turning to food and using food as a way to distract yourself from the problem itself, from that feeling of discomfort, means that you're not dealing with the situation that is making you feel uncomfortable. You're actually avoiding it. And then this can often be the reason why you get stuck into a bit of a cycle then, because you think you're dealing with the problem because you feel that little bit better, but then that problem's going to rise up again because you haven't dealt with it. So at some point those emotions will come back, and so you reach for the food again. You feel better, you carry on, but then the problem comes back again. And you see how the cycle just kind of continues. So by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and practicing relaxing in the face of discomfort, so relaxing your body, breathing deeply, it all sounds simple, but it does take some work and you do need to practice. But if you do put in the work and if you do practice this, it can be so effective, and it could be one of the greatest recoveries for your emotional eating and finding a new way to manage those uncomfortable situations. So just as an example, Let's say you've got a team meeting coming up and you're feeling a lot of anxiety around it. You're not very good in meeting situations. Maybe you've got to give a presentation in there. So one of the best things that you could do would be to take yourself away 5-10 minutes before the meeting and just really practice relaxing your body 100%. Do it in the toilet if you want to, or just if you can find a cupboard somewhere, or in your car, maybe before you go into the building, and just practice really relaxing your body 100%, just letting it all go, letting those muscles relax, and breathing really deeply, taking deep inhales through the nose, big exhales out through the mouth, and just practice that for a good 5-10 minutes. And that's going to help massively. That will help to prep you. And then when you're in the actual situation, so when you're sat there in the meeting, you can be doing deep breathing without anyone knowing. If you practice doing it through your nose, very steady, very calmly, this can be done without anyone even knowing. And it's just a really great way to learn how to better manage those uncomfortable situations. And then once you've created that connection in your head, that's how you handle uncomfortable situations, you're more likely to just automatically go for that as your coping mechanism than reaching for food. Okay, so the second cause for emotional eating is a lack of self-esteem. Those that eat emotionally generally aren't happy with themselves in one way or another. In a sense, this is another form of emotional discomfort that emotional eaters try to soothe with food. So very similar, to what we just spoke about in the first cause, is that there is some level of emotional discomfort, and that's the cause for reaching for food, just to soothe that pain. Now, there are many resources available for dealing with low self-esteem, but here's a few just very quick ideas to get you started. So putting a stop to that inner critic, because we all have one from time to time, and some of us have a slightly larger inner critic than others. I've been there, I'm still not 100%. I still have an inner critic that probably pops up its head on a daily basis. It happens, but if you can learn how to deal with that inner critic and how to manage that inner critic, then it becomes a lot more manageable in your day-to-day life. As soon as you begin talking negatively to yourself, that's when you want to be changing your thoughts. So it's learning to really be aware of that inner critic, and when it starts to speak those negative words in your head, and to be able to then say, no, I need to stop this now and I need to change my thoughts. Now, spending 1 minute or 5 out of every hour just appreciating yourself. It sounds like a lot to do throughout the day, and maybe it can be a little bit too much for some people. So even if you just did, 5 minutes at the start of your day or at the end of the day when you're laying in bed, but make a short list of things that you really like about yourself. And if you can, just try to repeat this throughout the day, because if you've got low self-esteem, then, chances are you're going to have this inner critic talking at you throughout the day, right? So you want to be trying to change that, and you want to be trying to create positive conversations in your head. Now, this can be really difficult when you're suffering with low self-esteem, because, chances are you've had those negative thoughts for quite some time, which has led you to, being so low in self-esteem. And everyone's, again, on varying levels with this. So I guess the more that you've been struggling with this, the longer it's probably going to take for you to practice it. But you can 100% come out of it. Now, I really like to use the mirror technique. If you've not heard of that, it's a really great tool to be able to change your thought process and to change that inner critic. Because for me personally, I did struggle with just trying to speak positively in my mind and believe it at the same time. So I used the mirror trick. So I would go and stand in front of the mirror in the morning. I'm in there anyway. I'm in the bathroom, brushing my teeth or whatever. I would just take 5 minutes. I would stand in front of the mirror. I would look myself in the eye and I would change the negative thoughts that I was having to positive thoughts. So for example, I've got slightly crooked teeth, right? I always used to get called like rabbit teeth and all that kind of stuff. I've got those 2 big front teeth at the front and they dip a little bit to the side as well. And I really like, I'm not a fan of it. Like I find it quite annoying when I see it in photos. And I got to a point where I got really stressed out about it, and I was willing to pay a lot of money to have my teeth ripped out and get some dentures put in, or veneers. Sorry, I think it's called veneers, isn't it? Now I've not done that, but what I was able to do was look myself in the mirror and look at my teeth and spend time really looking at my teeth, because quite often when we have low self-esteem with an area with our bodies, we'll avoid looking at that body. So, looking at that part of our body. So, for example, if you don't like your stomach because maybe you think it's too flabby or there's stretch marks or something, you'll do your best usually to just avoid looking at it. You know, sometimes we can't bring ourselves around to looking at it. Now, if you can change that, if you can spend more time looking at it, you become more comfortable with looking at it, right? So again, like we spoke about earlier, it's best not to avoid the uncomfortable situation. It's best to address it. So especially when it comes to lack of self-esteem. So with my teeth, I would look at myself in the mirror and I would smile, which is a great thing to do anyway. That always makes you feel better when you just smile. And I would really look at my teeth and I would pick out what I could that I did like about them, right? So my top teeth, even though they've got a little crook, they are in general quite straight. They are a good colour. They're not too yellow, you know. They could be better, but they're not that bad. They're in generally good health. So I would spend 5 minutes just really trying to pick out the best parts of my teeth. Now, it might be that you can only get like 1 or 2 good points to say about that specific area of your body that you're struggling with. But even if you just have one thing to talk about and just repeat that back to yourself, look yourself in the eye, in the mirror, and repeat that back for about 5 or 10 minutes. And if you just keep doing that every single day and you stick with it, well, do it and let me know how you get on, because I would say 95% doing that for a few weeks on a daily basis, you're going to start to see some improvement there. So the third cause is stress. Now, I've listed stress because, again, this is something that I went through as well. My eating habits, or my negative eating habits, developed whilst I was at university, and I wasn't aware at the time that I was stressed, because again, I was avoiding trying to figure out what I was doing, and I was just finding any way that I could to cope with what was going on around me. But yeah, I had a lot of pressures. I was in my 3rd year. I had deadlines, which I hate anyway. There was a lot of things going on in my personal life, and it all just became too much, and I didn't realise how stressed I had become. Something that I've always struggled to identify, because I kind of get stuck in this bubble and I just roll day in and day out. But stress itself is a real issue. It literally changes the foods or the types of foods that you crave as well. Studies have shown that foods high in fat or sugar decrease the body's response to stress. So, you know, comfort foods really do earn that name. This is where it can become a problem, because, you know, scientifically, yes, it decreases the stress levels. And so when we make that connection and when we feel it working, when we're in a stressful moment in our life and we reach for the food to calm us down, well, it's worked. So we're going to want to do that every time, aren't we? And then that kind of becomes a bit of a habit, and then that habit kind of takes over and becomes the only way that we know to easily overcome or manage stress. So I would look, you know, if you're resonating with this, I would look, first of all, trying to identify, are you stressed? Do you really fully understand what being stressed is, the symptoms of stress, and can you identify with any of those? And then, are there ways that you can try and reduce that stress in your life? And how can you do that? So let's say your work life is causing you a lot of stress. What specific aspects within your role at work are causing those levels of stress? Is there a way that you can reduce that, or is there a way that you can better manage that? A lot of the time when it comes to work and stress, it's because people just haven't been able to set boundaries. So let's say you work in a typical 9-to-5 job and, it's quite full on. When you're in the office, it's non-stop. You've got people phoning you up. You've got a team to lead. You've got questions being asked. You've got deadlines for reports, and it can be quite stressful. Let's say it gets to 5 o'clock, you drive home, you've got a call on your way home from someone who's needing some help. You get home, someone has decided that they need a report in the next day, or you want to try and get ahead of stuff so that you're feeling a little bit better about going into work the next day because you're already one step ahead. What you've done there is you've gone past your boundaries. You've broken your work hours and you've gone overtime, right? And a lot of people don't fully recognize that because they think, oh, well, I'm doing it because I'm trying to get ahead of the next day. But the problem is that every day becomes like this. So you'll wake up the next day and you'll do exactly the same thing and keep doing it. So if work stress is something that you can identify and resonate with, then I would just recommend trying to set those boundaries. So if your working hours are 9 to 5 a day, when it gets to 5 o'clock, if you can, because I know that obviously some jobs are different and there's going to be some people listening to this podcast saying, look, Emma, I can't just turn off at 5. If someone needs me after that time, I've got to be there. But it really is about setting boundaries. So, if you lead a team, for example, can you say, look, gang, after, 8 o'clock at night, unless it's an emergency, then please don't message me. And if it is emergency, then just phone me, okay? Because otherwise I'm not going to respond. So emergency communication only after 8 p.m. at night. Just as an example, right? You could even say after 5 p.m. because that's your working hours. It's really just about figuring out how can you set those boundaries, but then how can you stick to those boundaries? And that's going to be a huge improvement, especially where stress is connected to your work life. So the next cause is a lack of awareness during eating. So it's so much easier to overeat when your attention is elsewhere. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of people listening to this right now who are really going to be able to connect and resonate with this one. For example, when you're watching TV at night, do you find that this is when you tend to snack a lot more? Or do you find that this is where the binge eating comes on when you're sat in front of the TV? This is just so common. It is so common. I've been through it, and the people that I've helped have been through it. The people I talk to have been through it. So many people have gone through this on different scales. And the reason being is because our attention is elsewhere. We're watching TV and we're not really thinking about what we're eating. So you might go make a cup of tea, grab a packet of biscuits and think, right, I'm just going to have, just 1 or 2 biscuits to dunk in my cup of tea while I watch this programme. Next thing you know, you're looking down at the packet and you're pulling out the last one. And it's like, where did it all go? And it's because you've not been mindful of how much you've actually been eating. It's kind of just become automatic. You just reach your hand in and you grab another one and you continue. So whether your attention is on the TV or, whether it's on friends, out and about, or your thoughts, either way, like this lack of awareness can really lead to overeating. So a really good idea is that when you're eating, try to do nothing else but eat. And that's going to be difficult because if you are someone who sits in front of the TV in an evening and then this is when your binges tend to be, what you're going to have to try and do here, if you want to have a go at this one, is to say, right, when I'm watching TV, I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to snack. And if I do want to do it, the TV's going to get paused. I'll have the food or the snack that I want. Then I'll sit back down and I'll start the TV again. That's just one way that you can try and give that a go, like a little bit of a test, and just see how it makes you feel. Although, having said that, if you're still keeping yourself in the same room, having the snack, and then trying to stop and start the TV, then it easily leads to, oh, do you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to have the rest anyway. So it could be worth maybe that you just completely decide when you're watching TV that you don't eat, or you keep the food in another room. So if you want to have that snack, go out of the room, have the snack, but then come back in and continue watching TV. So it's really just about having that awareness. And it's the same for if you're having a meal out or you're having dinner at home where you're having the larger meals. It might be that you're already full, but because you're not aware of what you're doing, because your thoughts are elsewhere, or again, watching TV or working on the laptop or chatting away with friends, whatever it is, if your thoughts are elsewhere, then you may end up passing that feeling of fullness and you just continue and continue and continue. And then that can lead to overeating in itself. So I kind of believe that a multi-pronged approach tends to work best when dealing with the challenges of emotional eating. I would consider getting help from a doctor or a mental health professional if you're unable to make progress on your own. So if you have identified with any of these and they're becoming a real problem in your daily life and you feel like they're really holding you back, then I think this is the point where you would want to think about seeking help, whether it's from, like I say, a doctor or a mental health professional, or even a holistic recovery coach like myself, who will have a slightly different approach from the typical clinical aspects. Either way, whatever works, I think if you're feeling trapped and stuck in this continuous cycle that is really affecting your quality of life, then 100% I would suggest thinking about seeking support and help in one way or another. Now, I definitely give these trials a go. Trials, not trials. I definitely give these tips a go and just see if they can help you first. I think the reasons that I've given and the tips to try and overcome these are things that you could probably implement from today. Nothing too complicated there, quite simple advice. So you could really start giving this a go, today, trying to choose looking at one of those causes and identifying if this is potentially one of your triggers. And if you do give it a go and you get some results, then please let me know, because that would just be amazing. I would love to hear if you have had success by following any of the advice in today's show. And if you can think of anyone who might be struggling with emotional eating or binge eating, whether it's on a small scale or a larger scale, then just referring them to this podcast episode could be a real step towards their recovery, and just to be able to help them highlight and understand what it is that they're going through. Especially if it's not yourself and it's someone who is close to you. Showing your support is an amazing thing, and it can honestly be the key point in that person being able to recover from their emotional eating. So big love to anyone who is currently going through this or knows someone and is supporting someone through this, because it can be an extremely challenging time. I'm going to leave the episode there because I never like to throw too much information into these podcasts, but I just want to say a huge thank you to you guys for continuing to support this podcast and to stick with me all the way to the end, because if you're listening to this, that means that you have. So thank you. Again, this podcast is intended for just providing some advice and tips based on my own experience and the people who I currently work with. It isn't intended to replace any medical advice that you've been given from a medical professional or doctor, and I would always recommend that first and foremost you seek professional help before taking on any of the advice and tips that have been provided in this show. But if you're at a place where you can do that, then by all means do. Thank you for listening, supporting, continuing to share this podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, then of course I'd really appreciate a review just so that I can connect with you as well. Come and say hey, let me know how you find this podcast. Give me your feedback, good or bad. I think any feedback is valuable for me, and come and connect with me on Instagram, Em.Powercoaching UK, and also Facebook, same name, Em.Powercoaching UK. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your story, your journey. If you're currently going through either disordered eating or an eating disorder and you want to have someone just to chat to support, then please feel free to hop on over there and come and connect with me, because I would love to speak with you. But for now, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you've all had a lovely weekend, and I look forward to connecting with you next week. Bye.